was working on this project for the Texas Central Railway to put in this high-speed rail between Dallas and Houston. Getting back to our commuter issues, do you think that is more feasible now than it has been in the past? And is it true that there really is no government funding for this private entity if it comes to fruition?
Well, of course, Judge Eccles was my predecessor here, and I have great respect for him, and so he and I have talked a lot about it. If the Japan Central Railways people decide they want to build a high-speed rail line and they pay for it, then I think it's much more feasible. You would have to ask them whether or not they really have the money. But I do know that if you look at all the corridors around the country that lend themselves well to high-speed rail, the one between Houston and Dallas is right at the top of the list because it's short enough to really be competitive with airlines. Particularly, now you go to the airport, you take off your shoes, you wait, you have to get there an hour in advance.
Yeah, all the
you get at the other end. If you can get on a train and relax and be there in the same time, then people are going to do that, I think, all the time. Just like when I lived on the East Coast, it never crossed my mind to fly between Washington and New York. I always took the train.
You think it is feasible, though, that it can be done without any government funding?
That's up to the Japan Central Railways. They say it is.
Okay.
And so if they want to take on that, then more power to them.
Well, I know you've worked really hard to keep taxes low and even been able to cut taxes in some respects. Do you think that as the city continues to grow so rapidly, is that going to continue to be feasible?
Well, of course, the county only gets property tax revenue. We get a little bit of hotel tax and things like that. But by and large, the county budget is purely property tax based, which presents a serious problem in two ways. Number one, there's a lag between economic activity and the property tax appraisals that do go up. But the second problem is when the appraisals go up, property owners get all upset that their taxes are going up.
Right.
So it's kind of a no-win situation. We have to provide services for the growth that is already here and that we know is coming. And so it's a great little dance we have to do. I think sooner or later there's got to be a different revenue stream. We have people running for state office right now saying they're going to lower your property taxes. Well, the state doesn't even have a property tax. So do they mean they're going to lower the property taxes that the county and the school districts levy? If so, how are we going to make up that revenue? So that's all part of this urban governance question. If the city's not going to take over these suburbs, then we're going to have a means of providing the services that people in those suburbs deserve and need.
It seems that the mayor has put a lot of money in getting homeless people off the streets. I know that was a big initiative, and it's worked really well for her. However, I think it's left somewhat of a gap in low-income housing being built. The developers around the city seem to be starting no lower than around a $250,000 price point. There are only a couple small ones that I can think of, that are building lower. But for the majority of the city, you see housing new homes starting at $250 and even much higher. Do you think that, or do you see anything coming down the pipeline to help with low-income housing in the Houston area so that we don't have, people first-time home buyers unable to purchase in the area?
Well, that raises a fascinating question, and I was in a meeting really a couple of weeks ago where the whole subject was suburban poverty. And people don't think about suburban and poverty in the same context. But in fact, that is what's going on. And if you mentioned the 1960 area earlier. You go out into Alief, places like that. A lot of the, it's going to sound bad to say lower quality, but the lower levels of subdivisions that were built out there 40 years ago, 50 years ago, are now becoming the places that can be afforded by young families.
Right.
And we are seeing this poverty, sort of. I mean, it's kind of the working poor moving out to the suburbs, leaving the city because of what you mentioned. They can't afford to live in the city. But a lot of them are also moving for the schools and the mere fact that they can get a yard and can have a bit of a home that they can't have in the city. So all the more reason that we need to look at what services does the county provide and how does it pay for them.
Okay. So as, well, for you and the legacy that Harris County is going to have, what do you want your legacy to be? You've worked really hard for the people of Harris County. What do you want them to see being your legacy?
I don't think that it will ever be seen as a person's legacy, but the things that I work on day in and day out are transportation improvements, because I know you have to make those 40 years in advance. Health care, whether we like it or not, that has become a big public policy issue, and my particular interest is in mental health, because for too long mental health was kind of out of sight, out of mind, and we need to make sure that people with mental health issues receive the treatment they need rather than ending up in the criminal justice system.
Right.
That's a better deal for the taxpayer. Costs a lot to deal with somebody in criminal justice system when they really need to be cared for in the mental health system. So those are the two things that are at the top of my list. Then we have this third thing that, whether I like it or not, people are going to judge, and that's, what are we going to do with the Astrodome? It's a building. It's fully paid for. It belongs to the taxpayers. And anything we do, whether we save it or whether we tear it down, is going to cost tens of millions of dollars. And now it's being designated a historical landmark, which makes it even more dicey question to ask. And while long-term that won't have the most important impact in the future, people will probably remember that for a long time.
So give us your 2 cents on what should be done with it.
At this point, I really believe that we need to keep it as an open space, turn it into the world's largest indoor park. It belongs to the taxpayers. Let the taxpayers use it as a park. It's got 9 acres of green space on the old field. We have groups that want to build hike and bike trails in the upper levels. I think it's possible to then look at what private ventures can go in and maybe provide restaurants or museums or science, technology, engineering, mathematics centers, things like that, just like any other park. It's just that this one will be covered.
Okay. You mentioned healthcare, and do you see progress being made with the people who have mental health issues? Are we seeing fewer of them go into our jail system?
Fewer, but whether it's measurable or not remains to be seen. The legislature this last session created a pilot project for Harris County where if we can identify the people who are the frequent flyers, the ones who keep getting arrested and rearrested when their real issue is mental health, not that they're criminals.
Right.
When we asked the question at the beginning, how many people in Harris County over a 2-year period had been arrested at least 5 times, the number came back over 8,000. So if we can keep 500, 1,000, 2,000 out of that, that helps, but it still just shows the daunting task that we face.
With all of the controversy over the way that Ebola was handled across the nation, how do you think we are positioned in Harris County to handle a crisis like that?
Well, first, Ebola, in my mind, was not a crisis.
Wasn't a crisis. But according to the national news, it was.
Yeah, but I used to ask people all the time, I said, okay, how long has the Ebola crisis in West Africa been going? And the answer is a year, roughly. How many thousands of flights had there been to Europe from West Africa during all that time? And how many cases of Ebola had broken out in Europe? And the answer is 1. That's hardly the kind of thing we need to worry about. A bigger worry for me is, well, two aspects. 1, flu. Everybody needs to get a flu shot because we have thousands of people across the country die of the flu every year because they're not immunized. And secondly, more and more people are not immunizing their children. And that's a shame because those of us who grew up in an era of polio, we understand the importance of having kids vaccinated. And to have outbreaks now of pertussis, whooping cough, things like that, there's just no reason for it in our modern society. But unfortunately, people have become too comfortable. And if you have a large pool of unvaccinated children and then somebody does come in from, say, out of the country, then we have a real outbreak that's going to kill a lot of children, and that would be much, much more unfortunate.
All right, well, I know you're very busy. You've got a lot going on. I appreciate you taking time out to talk with us on the show today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, we appreciate the great work you're doing around Harris County. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.